Hello, I'm Don Moore. This is my lampworking workshop. This is the torch. It's a Bethlehem beta torch. It's run through an oxygen concentrator for the center, the smaller flame, and an oxygen tank for the outer flame. I use Pyrex glass or borosilicate glass, and this video is going to be on making a glass angel that's good for Christmas ornament or Christmas decoration. There are several tools that we use. The glass blowing or lampworking is fairly simple in its tools. You can use a tweezer to pull the glass once it's hot. These graphite shaped objects are called reamers, and you can use that to enlarge hollow objects. The graphite pad on the top of the torch is called a marver. I guess marver is Latin for marble, and it's what they used to roll glass on to shape it, but now we use graphite. I have a graphite paddle. It's also a marble mold in case you're making marbles. And then various kinds of scissors. These are just straight shears. You can cut the glass once it gets very hot. These are called diamond shears, which are scissors, but they have this diamond cutout in that so that when the glass is in the middle there, you can evenly narrow it or even eventually cut one part off from another. You can also grab it with the ends of those there. And then I have they're called mashers that just mash the glass, and they've got patterns. You can get them in different patterns so that once you mash the glass, it'll shape it into a flat shape, but also put different decoration or lines on them. I use this for the angel's wings. We use a variety of things to make it. The borosilicate glass or Pyrex glass, you have tubes. These are various sizes. I use a blow hose with it to try and puff air into it, and then we can coat it with rods that are colored. They used to have to mix their own colors with metals, but we're nice enough these days to supply us with rods that are already colored. That makes it a lot easier to just get on with the project. All right, and I'm prepping to make another angel here. We're gonna pull a stringer out of this glass called blue caramel that turns to kind of a gold, silvery gold kind of color. And so we heat up a little gather of that, take it out of the flame, and then give it a minute, and then slowly pull it into a thin string of glass. It's called a stringer. So that'll be ready to go when we need it there. So the first thing we'll do is make the angel's wings. So I'll take some cobalt blue here. Heat a gather up, which is just a little sphere of glass on the end of the rod. You keep rotating the rod so that the glass stays on axis. If you stop rotating it, it'll sink down like that. So you have to rotate it evenly to keep it in line with the rest of the glass rod. And as you heat glass, it just naturally pulls itself into a sphere, and depending on how you angle it, either with your elbow down or up, it may make that either oblong or foreshortened. Get that gather big enough, you can heat your tool up. These are a set of mashers with a vein pattern or leaf pattern on them, and you just can set that all there and then mash it into like a lollipop shape there. And we're going to heat this up evenly and pull it into a shape that looks more like an angel's wing. This is what we call a punty. It's just any glass rod that you can use to temporarily hold or manipulate the glass. So you get the color fairly even. The tip's going to be a little hotter, and it's going to pull out a little bit more. You attach the punty and then slowly pull it out, and then as it cools you can pull a little harder, and that turns it into a wing-like shape. And then I'll pull the rest of the rod off the end there. You can use glass to kind of remove a little excess. And then once we get that all set, we take some tweezers, heat those up, and then we can pull this wing off the punty. Make sure it's flame polished there in the end. Then we take this and we'll put this in the kiln. Then we make another wing the same way. This torch is a Bethlehem Beta torch. It's kind of a mid-range torch, a little bit bigger than the beginning torches. It has two sets of flames, a center flame here that I'm running with the oxygen concentrators and a propane tank, and then it's on a pedal. I can turn on the outer flame, which is a little bigger, gives me a little more heat. Can melt glass a little faster, and that's supplied largely with an oxygen tank to get a little extra pressure. As we get this approximately the same size as the gather that we had with the other wing, then do the same thing, put that on the mashers and mash it in, and again we'll heat that up and pull it into a wing shape. The wings are often just a little different size, but here in Plymouth that's okay. Our angels can be a little bit imperfect. If it were in Duxbury, that the specifications would be a little bit more demanding. And again, we kind of start slow, and then as it cools, we'll pull it a little harder, and then how hard you pull it and how you set the heat up will determine a little bit more of the shape of the wing. And so just take some practice to get to where you keep them somewhat similar and the shape that you'd like for your angel. And just kind of prepare the rod to use that again. And the next step, again, we'll heat up the tweezers and pull this off the glass rod, and that's the other wing there. So we'll put that in the kiln. And the next step is to make the halo. So this rod's a little bit thick to make a halo. Well, you could use it this way, but it's easier to thin it out just a little bit so that we can loop it over and have it close to the size that we need. So I put a temporary rod or a punty on that end, and I heat up a section about 1.5 inches of 2 inches of the rod, and try and get this kind of orange color fairly even, so I know that the heat's about the same. That way when I pull it, it'll all pull fairly evenly, and I'm not going to have to pull it very far. Just heat it up and then let the heat kind of equilibrate there a little bit, and then just gently pull it out to thin it down just a bit. Any area that's a little thicker like this, I can heat up a little more just separately. Now we've got a little section that's fairly even, and I'll flame cut at the end of that little narrower section. I've got a section now I can heat up and until it will bend for me, and then I can bend it into a circle, a loop. That's hot, then I'll turn this around and then I can heat where they come together there to melt the ends of the loops together. And it's still attached to the rod. So I can use this little graphite pad called a marver to straighten things out. So the first I'll work on the half that's farthest away from the rod here and kind of heat that up fairly evenly. This is it's called a reamer made out of graphite that doesn't stick to the glass, and I can use this to try and shape it into a more complete circle, and you can thin it out, enlarge the circle if I need to. And I heat the graphite up so it doesn't shock the glass too much for the difference in temperature. So that's about the size that I need, and the walls look fairly even. So then I'll use another punty, and what we'll do is do what's called a cold seal, and with this you heat up one of the pieces of glass. In this case I'm going to heat the rod up, just the tip, and leave the halo itself just warm. And then when you touch the glass rod to it, it'll stick, but not very tightly, so we'll be able to tap that off later. And then I flame cut the original rod off. And then I can heat this other end of the halo and shape that a bit. So this part will be attaching to the head, so it can be a little bit thicker. And I heat it till the glass seems to be fairly even, and then again I can shape it with the reamer here. Flatten it out and shape it there. And so that's a fairly even shape for the halo, so I can put that to the side for a second while I make the head. So I have a 12mm clear rod that I'll use for the head, and I can heat this again. It'll naturally gather into a sphere, and since it's a larger rod, it'll be just a little bit larger gather and be about the right size for the angel head I'm thinking about. It's a pretty stylized angel. There's no facial features on it. So just try and slowly have that gather into a sphere. Keep it rotating so that it stays on axis with the rod. You can see it's now come into a little bit of a ball at the end of that rod, and so I'm going to take that off. So I use these what are called diamond shears. They're scissors essentially, but they make a diamond shape when they come together, and so that helps you narrow down piece of glass. So I'm going to heat it more precisely, just where that ball meets the rod. I'm going to use the diamond shears to gradually narrow that area down, and that's going to make it easier to take that off the rod while still maintaining the shape. Yes, get another hundy ready to go here. So I can heat the sphere up a little bit again to make sure the shape is right on this part of it. And again, I'll heat a glass rod to attach as a punty there, and then flame cut the original connection. And then I can work on this side of the head, just heating that to where it ends up being fairly even with the other side of the sphere. And this can wind up being the top of the head. That's pretty close for an angel. And then go back and take the halo that we made before. I'm going to heat just the part of the halo that's going to connect with the head, and heat that part of the head, and we'll fuse them together in the flame. This way it's going to be a hot seal, so both sides, both pieces of glass are going to be very hot and molten, and as you touch them they'll fuse, and then you can pull the halo over to where it should be position-wise. Hold that until it cools a bit. And you can tap one of the rods. Since it's a cold seal, just to tap, it'll usually come off nicely like that. And if it's a little too well attached, you may have to flame cut it. And we can take this and tap the other side off, and once you tap a rod off like that, a punty, it leaves a little mark, so you can flame polish it to get rid of that little scar where the rod was. And so there we've got the head, and we can now put that in the kiln to keep that warm. Then we're ready to start working on the body of the angel. So what I've done here is I connected it's a 12mm tube. It's hollow with I think it's about a 20 or 18 or 20mm tube to be about the right size for what I want to make the angel. And it's connected to a blow hose here, so I can puff air into it as I need to shape it. And so I'm going to coat the glass with this cobalt blue to get the main body of the angel a blue color, and we can decorate that a little bit before we put the wings and the head on. So the first thing we have to do is heat the tube up so that the blue glass will stick to it. Glass won't stick to glass that's cold, so you have to heat it up enough to make it accept the glass color, but not so much to make it floppy. And just get a feel for when it's about that right temperature, and you can use this graphite pad, the marver, to straighten it. And so then I'll keep the larger tube warm and up higher in the flame, and then heat the cobalt blue glass in the hotter part of the flame until it's liquidy, almost like honey, and then we can stripe it onto the the bigger blue tube, a bigger clear tube. You decide about how big you want the angel to be. So we'll just keep doing this all the way around the tube until we get it coated with the cobalt blue glass. And you try and keep the tube warm. If it cools down too much, it's apt to crack as you heat it back up again. So you keep it close to the flame and periodically flash it in the flame so that it won't cool down too much. You can keep the tube just underneath the flame and then bring it up into the flame when you're ready to start striping the color onto it. So as you stripe the glass, you try and keep it close to the glass next to it so it doesn't form a little bubble, and you can kind of turn the cobalt blue as well as you stripe it down to try and eliminate any unnecessary gaps and get it right up against that adjacent color. Just flash it a little bit. Almost there. Almost one more little stripe. And done. And so now the clear tube is coated with the cobalt blue, and so we can heat it while we keep turning it to try and melt that blue in there and make it more even looking. So you can do that in segments with a larger flame, and as you heat it, it's going to condense down a little bit and thicken up, and periodically I'll puff a little air into it to get it back into shape, keep it from closing up completely. And we can also roll it on this graphite pad to help smooth it out a little bit more quickly and shape it. As you work with it up close, you can actually see the bubble of air inside it so that you can tell if the walls are fairly even. It's a good idea to keep the walls of a hollow glass object fairly even so that it's less likely to crack or thin out too much. And when you blow glass, you just really have to do very light puffs, because all you really do is shaping it. It's not like people think where you have to blow very hard into the tube. And so part of making something look nice is to continually condense it down with the flame and then puff it back up, and the more you do that, the more even it starts to appear. So the angel's body is essentially going to be a cone, so I'll narrow down the top of it and then puff out the bottom so it's cone shaped. We'll get it close to a shape before we start decorating it, and then we can puff it up into the kind of final shape right before we take it off the tube here. And if you wanted to make the angel a little taller, you can hold your elbow up like that and gravity will just naturally pull it down. And then I'm going to roll it on the marver here to create a little bit of a point at the top. See, it's starting to look a little bit more like a cone. You don't want to thin it out too much because we're going to apply a little colored glass to it to make a design, and we don't want that to, to be too floppy. The other thing a graphite pad, the marver, does is cool off the portion of glass that is in contact with it. So if you want to cool down a section of it before you blow so that that section doesn't blow out as much, you can use it in that way to shape it and to control the heat in the object. So that's fairly close to a little cone shape for an angel. And then what I'll do is I'll put a couple of stripes around it that we can manipulate into a little border at the bottom of the gown here. So I pulled out some stringers we did before. You can use a little green. This is it's called, I think it's Millennium Moss. It's a little sparkly green. I'll put one stripe around with this. You can melt that in a little bit. And I can put a couple of stripes on the outside of that. We can use that caramel blue. Can melt that one in too. And what we'll do is we'll heat individual spots on this and then use another glass rod to twist it to make a spiral kind of pattern. So kind of narrow the flame down so we can just spot heat the project. When it's hot enough, we take it out and put the putty on, and then we can twist it. And you wait for it to cool, and when it's cooled, the glass will harden enough where you can just break it off. Here I have the wing in the flame and the angel's body, and I heat a small section on each and then gradually join the base of the wing to the back of the arm of the angel. And once that's fused in, then I can position it where I need it. I give the angel another little heat flash so that it's evenly heated, and then I attach the opposite wing. And you can try and position that where it looks fairly symmetric with the other side, and take the putty off and again evenly heat the body of the angel. The next step is to take the angel's body off of that clear glass tube. So for that I'm going to use another punty and attach it to the point of the angel there. And once that's attached, I'll heat the angel right at the base where the clear tube meets the cobalt blue. Once that's heated enough, I can blow some air into it to thin out that wall, and then pull the glass tube away from the angel. Eventually it'll create a little bubble that's thin enough that when you put it back in the flame, it cuts the glass off there. Take the angel right off. So at this point I'm going to use the scissors, the shears, and heat the base of the angel up and then trim it to where it's relatively flat and even. With most of the clear glass cut off, and then finish trimming that up a little bit. That's done, then you can heat up the base of the angel and use this other reamer to enlarge the base a little bit and straighten it out to where it's a fairly even, symmetric cone shape. And flare the base out some so that when the angel is on the table it sits evenly. It's flared out. I'm going to use another graphite paddle here to make sure everything's nice and flat and level on the bottom. And these are some grabbers you can use to hold hollow objects there. You heat those up and clamp them down on the base of the angel. Lock it in place, and then I use the flame to cut the punty rod off the point or the shoulders of the angel, and then it's going to be ready to fuse the head on. Okay, for a little extra glass with the rod. I'll heat up the tweezers so I can retrieve the head from the kiln, and so now I have the head. I'm going to heat the base of the head there and the top of the shoulders of the angel. And once they're both molten, and you can touch them together and fuse those two pieces. While it's still warm, you can adjust the angle of the head, and once you do that, you take it off, put it in the kiln, and cool it overnight. It's all done.